So before we attempt rendering our particles, let's add some color to the instances that then can be inherited by the material. So first of all, let's go back to our emitter. And remember, I told you at some point that I usually like to emit from points rather than geometry. And one of the main reasons is that points are more easily manipulated. And in this case, we can scatter a bunch of points on top of the geometry and add some noise to them. So let's add a point VOP node. Let's call this set color. Change the color of the actual node and dive into the node. So what I'm going to do is add a turbulence noise, and rather than connecting the position of the points, which we normally do, is I'll bring in the rest position, which is not changing through time. Remember, the position of the particles are changing through time, and this would change the color of the turbulent noise. So type tab and then type bind. This will bring in the attribute that we choose, in this case the rest position. And remember, the rest is a 3 float vector. So connect the rest position to the position of the noise, and then the turbulent noise to the color. So let's go back to our SOP context, and before our attribute BOP, let's lay down a scatter node. Zoom into the geometry. And probably increase the number of points. So here we can see only these pieces will be emitting particles. Let's activate the color. And let's change some of the attributes for the noise. Let's make some space here. And actually, I'm going to promote the frequency and the offset values, just so we can change them from above. So I'll go back, and here under our parameters, you will find the frequency and the offset. So let's increase the frequency, say to 100. And right now we're going more or less from black to white colors. So let's take a look at the geometry spreadsheet. So right now the minimum value is 0.04. The maximum value is 0.24. So we will remap these values with a fit range node. So minimum would be 0.04, maximum 0.24. So now I know that I have values ranging from 0 to 1. So you can double check. So the minimum value is 0.04. The maximum is 1. So finally, what I can do is remap the black and white values to whatever colors we want with a ramp parameter. So if we go back to our point VOP parameters, here you will find the color ramp. So just to make this clear, I will make one color yellow, one color blue, and of course the particles will inherit the color of the emitter. So let's change this yellow to some kind of brown color, probably a very dark brown. And the other color, this will give a nice variance of color. So one thing that we would need to do is change our emission here under source. Instead of scatter onto surfaces, we would use points. And this will look much nicer than just white colors. So now let's go to the material context. Let's create a classic shader. And one thing you need to make sure of is that you're using the point color, which by default it is. Just change the base color to white. And also let's change the reflection base. Let's increase the roughness a bit to 0.6 and probably make the material less reflecting, so bring down the intensity to 0.4. Now back to the object context, you can assign this material to the geometry. So let's go back to our camera view. Let's make sure we're outputting our particles. And remember, we need to bring in the color because apparently it is not here. So here on our attribute delete, let's tell it not to delete the CD attribute, the color. So there we go. Okay, so now let's create a few lights. I'm going to control click the environment light. This will be a secondary light, so I will bring the light intensity down, say to 0.2. And then I will control click the direct light. And for now, I can lock the camera view and just orient this light more or less to have a nicer angle. Again, turn off the lock camera button and go back to my camera view. So finally, we can go to the render view. Here under the render menu, create render node. Click on the Create Mantra PBR. Make sure to select the camera 2 and you can click and render. For now, I will turn off the preview mode. And one thing you usually want to add to this kind of particles is motion blur. So let's add some motion blur and probably let's increase the particle count so we have a denser particle trail. So back into the object context, on the geometry node, under the sampling tab, make sure to change the geometry velocity blur to velocity blur. And under the out context, under your mantra node, under the rendering tabs, turn on allow motion blur. Also, let's make sure to change the camera, in this case to camera number 2. And back to our simulation. Let's increase the particle count. So go to the pop source, birth, and in this case I will increase the birth rate by 10. Of course, we will need to recalculate the simulation. And let's try rendering a frame. Okay, so this is looking nice. We have some shading going on here. And later, these particles can also help us to generate the volume for fluid simulations. For now, if you want, just go to your out context, set your mantra node to render the entire frame range. Also, make sure under the images to select your desired output, and you could click render to disk to generate your sequence.